Well, thanks for coming. Welcome to this session on equity in permaculture. I'm going to hand straight over to Wal, who's going to start us off with introductions.
Oh, hi. Yeah, my name's Wal, and I suppose I've kind of come to get involved in this session through a bit of a crazy method. I met Jemma when she replied to an application I made to join one of the courses. A Quaker friend had sent me a link and was saying that there are some free courses for kind of minority group members and stuff. And through working through it and thinking about my experience in having an allotment and one or two other things, and also, I suppose, thinking about the teaching approach to being on a course as a student, I was keen to be involved, but also keen, I suppose, to wait until it was like possible for us to meet post-COVID, because in terms of my learning, at least, I know I would have got the most out of a course if I could have been in a room with others and, having direct contact. So, we kind of left it like that. And then we had a subsequent discussion around, some of our kind of interests in trying to bring about, I think, some of the issues relating to equity in terms of how we try and promote courses and try and promote involvement. And what kind of opportunities are there for raising awareness and changing attitudes and taking action with regards to either trying to get people involved in things like this, or more specifically examining curricula that we might be drawing on as well. So it's been a really important, I think, kind of journey for me, partly in terms of meeting Jemma, but also being encouraged by hearing something of the background to the work and what you guys are attempting to do.
And I'm Jemma. I'm the education lead at the Permaculture Education, for those of you that don't work with me already. A part of what I do is I support the education working group to make curriculum changes. So a part of this session is going to focus on that. That's definitely been one big part of my work. I also manage the educators membership, which is about 100 educators in it. And through that, I support continual professional development as well. So this session also feeds into that work. But a lot of the work I've been doing over the past year has really covered this strand of equity. It's been weaving into all aspects of my work, really. So I really want to see whether we can come up with there's a very complex problem that we're dealing with, and I just want to see if we can come up with some simple solutions to break down the barriers to engagement and move towards equity, really, in permaculture. We were going to go straight into breakout rooms, but I'm just going to see how many of you there are. There are 7 of us. Should we split them up into 2 groups, maybe? Well, actually, there is enough to do that with. So, Lucy, if you pop us into 2, we're going to go into 2 breakout rooms. And we just wanted to ask you to talk. Am I screen sharing? I'm not screen sharing. I wanted to talk to you, or you to talk to each other about vulnerability. So just to get to the right part of my slides. What's important just before you go into these breakout rooms is if anything comes up for anybody in this session that they find challenging or they want to talk to someone about afterwards, you can drop me an email, or feel free to just pass. You don't have to talk about anything that we ask you to do in the session, so just feel free to say pass or leave or get in contact with me afterwards. That's all cool. So to get started, we want you to think about the first time that you remember feeling vulnerable or excluded. So we're going to go into the breakout rooms, and we want you to share with each other a little bit about your experiences. When we come back, if we do discuss it, please don't talk about other people's personal experiences, but more just broadly around the topic. That's okay. So Lucy, if you could put them in.
So yeah.
We also got pulled out of our breakout rooms, just as Andy was making a really important point about as educators that sometimes it's not easy to share, or maybe you don't want to ask the stupid questions or raise your hand to say that I don't know. And I think many of us will experience times where we just don't even feel comfortable to express our vulnerability or in a group.
Most definitely. Are we all together now, Jemma? Because I was just wondering if there's anybody else who wanted to say anything in terms of what we've been talking about there.
Does anyone else want to share anything from their groups? Not sharing people's personal experiences, but just things that you gleaned from talking about vulnerability together. I know some of you weren't in the breakout rooms.
I think just generally being aware that we have all been excluded from certain situations, and they may be small points in our life for some of us, but there's the ability to empathise. We all have the ability to empathise with what it's like to be excluded, because I can't imagine that anybody has never been excluded from, felt that it's some situations in their lives. So
yeah. Excellent.
Anybody else? Thanks, Rania.
I think in general it led me to reflect on how as a child or a teenager or whenever we might not perceive that as a dangerous situation in terms of being exposed or extremely vulnerable, but later on, like on exercises like today, we can look back and say, oh wow, that was hard. Or that has a long-lasting effect, and how is it today? Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, like the one I shared in our group definitely had a long-lasting effect on me for the whole of my life. And I think if a person or people are experiencing lots of these things all the time, I think it's worth as organisers and educators to consider that when you're walking into a group with people, that these things last forever, and how we hold a space has an impact on a person's ability to show up and participate.
I would certainly echo what Jemma's saying. Specifically, I suppose, around my experiences within education, but I think more broadly within the society that we live in, it's kind of difficult when as an adult, you try and practice decision making and choices, but sometimes you're subject to actions because you maybe look a certain way, or you just might be in the wrong place according to someone else's understanding of how things work. And having worked both within and beyond Birmingham in say like training settings in kind of towns and rural settings and stuff like that, with faith groups, I've often either been followed by police to my destination, or been stopped and questioned as to what I'm doing and stuff like that, and subsequently I've had to learn how to handle myself and what to say and stuff like that. So I'm very much aware of in part that potential to kind of face vulnerability and to anticipate it, as well as a lot of embodied living experiences of it as well. Yeah.
Sure. And on that topic of vulnerability, we're going to show you a video next. I'm going to share my screen in a second and show you a video. I wanted to talk a little bit about how over the past year, with the work that I've been doing on this sort of equity stuff, there has been lots of times where I felt vulnerable not knowing the right language to use. And I know for me personally, not knowing the right words or what is offensive, it creates intense anxiety in me. And it really has affected my ability to be present and actually show up and listen to people because I'm so afraid of saying the wrong thing that I'm not properly engaging and like not fully there. And that's really, it's been challenging for me, but it's also, I've done a lot of work to fix that. And there's work that we can all do to sort of make sure we get to show up as our full selves, really. So I'm going to share my screen while introduces Emma Debeery.
Okay. Some of you might have heard of Emma or seen her on YouTube or even read her books and stuff. And she's, I think, quite an engaging kind of academic. And what's really kind of interesting is, in part, how she pulls on the fact that as a mixed heritage person of colour, being brought up in Ireland, I think in Dublin, the way in which she's kind of, I think, experienced lots of personal racisms within that society. And I think her current concerns, I suppose, are how people, in terms of forming alliances and working together and finding out the best ways of trying to recognise what would be a lot of the hidden racisms that seriously and negatively impact on people's lives. I think she's quite articulate and quite blunt, but I think she's also quite stimulating as well. So, as Jemma says, we've got a few minutes of this video we want to share with you.
Can I just check that that's working, everyone? Can you see the video? Oh, great. I thought I was showing the wrong thing there. Thanks. Brilliant. Cheers.
And then we'll have some time afterwards to discuss this.
That, this idea that diversity and inclusivity and representation are going to solve the deep and centuries-long racial divisions that have been intentionally engineered in our society, can somehow be overcome by what have almost become buzzwords and are often kind of lacking, I feel, in the generative power that is required to really do the work in terms of resolving kind of racial injustice that needs to be done. And also, I feel diverse is sometimes used by people who are scared to say the word black. They'll describe an area as diverse, and I'm like, it's not actually.
Or a person as a diverse person. I go, I'm not a diverse person. I'm just me.
Thank you. So it's kind of like a liberal kind of cop out from like saying this word that there's like discomfort around.
I think that's really interesting, though, because diversity is used, I think, most commonly in the workplace.
Yeah.
And very much so at the moment, where people are talking about trying to address headcount and, the number of black and Asian and minority ethnic or ethnic minority, depending on which side of that argument you are, people there are in an office.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is that, sorting out the numbers doesn't sort out the problem.
I don't think sorting out the numbers alone, I don't think populating certain institutions with just a few more black and brown faces is going to change the problem. These are often far more underlying systemic issues, and I think there's a lot of things that need to be dismantled and rebuilt rather than reformed. And not even reformed, but remaining the same. The systems remaining the same, but just putting in a few more diverse faces.
Whereabouts with 3 weeks?
Thank you. I was just getting into that again. Yeah. Okay, so I think for me, just if you do get the chance, please look at the whole of that interview. I think that particular one picks up on some of the things that Jemma was saying around, again, some of the challenges and vulnerabilities that can occur if we appear to be using the wrong word, or the kinds of meanings we understand by things like inclusion or being anti-racist, or having an approach that reflects diversity. And I think there are clearly kind of issues around, looking at those notions and trying to either contest them or to understand them and to have some shared meaning around them and to use them where they're possible. But I think, as Emma was just implying on the video as well, though, it's not just about populating places, and that clearly needs to happen. There needs to be a kind of way in which people understand these issues on a practical level, in terms of how ideas of class and race, directly impact on people's kind of ability to join organisations, to be part of what's going on. And in terms of how would I put it? In terms of how we might appear to be responsible for things that other people should have included, it can put a lot of pressure on how you might feel about participating in a situation. So I know, having spent a lot of time in formal education as a youth worker, the importance of being able to manage groups and to do that in youth club settings or whilst on residential and stuff like that, in terms of trying to make sure and manage people's participations, and that they feel that they're listened to, and that their backgrounds and some of the things that we're looking at can be kind of cued into and not appear different. And I can contrast that sharply with, say, being involved in formal educational settings, where I've often acted as an academic tutor and been an ear to many students who say they go to their lectures, but they feel afraid to kind of put their hands up because, the things that are being said don't appear to include them in the very curriculum they're trying to study. And often, again, these things will relate to a certain taken for granted Eurocentricness. It might be that the courses they're on have a very limited range of examples that illustrate some of the main points lecturers are making. And so, you can't really participate. And when you do participate, and if you say something that's contentious about class or race, you're either seen as the expert and having to talk for lots of other people, or it just seems unfair, because in effect, that's not your role to be leading the group unless you've been kind of prepared for beforehand. So I think what I'm trying to say through some of this is that in organising learning events as trainers, as teachers, we need to be mindful of the material and how we're using it, and obviously how we've prepared in terms of some of the sources we've drawn on, but also some of the issues that might be occurring amongst our participants. And, I think ordinarily, going back to that initial breakout that we had, we can get a sense of the empathetic when we think of, a woman being surrounded by male banter, or some kind of situation that's about, you have to struggle to hold your self-respect and to be taken seriously. What do people feel, having heard what Emma has been talking about?
Well, I guess one of the things that, just briefly, I would say is that Emma's calling for really total systemic change in the way society works, and so are we. So we should really be standing in solidarity with Black and brown people. Mm-hmm. We want a different world. We want to be in harmony with nature, as part of nature. Earth care, people care, fair shares. I think, we've got to find a way to really make sure that we stand together.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts on that? Cool.
I was just going to add that, what was kind of came out strongly for me was that I think, particularly when you're running courses, you can be acutely aware of the lack of like black and brown faces in that course, and be really thinking about, okay, well, how can we change that? But it's easy to think about success in terms of, what is the diversity of the next kind of course, and actually, I think it was really important to think about the fact that whatever the makeup of the course participants looks like, really this work has to be about getting to the root of the issue and making sure that the materials that we're delivering and how we're delivering it and how we are interacting and understanding the people who join courses is key.
Thank you for that. Patrick, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I missed the breakout rooms. I've just joined maybe 10 minutes ago, so apologies if I've missed anything else. So the reason why I'm actually in this session and the few days as a whole is because I did reach out to the Permaculture Association regarding two events that really did affect me, racially motivated, and they were both within not a course run by the Permaculture Association, but an organisation that I thought were associated with them. It turns out that they're not. And just the way it was handled, basically. So these were Zoom sessions, and very, very damaging things were said about race, which were not really followed up properly. I'm still actually inquiring about the best way to actually approach this. The reason why I actually reached out is that I know for a fact that this happens all the time. I've experienced it. I'm 54 myself. My formative years were the 80s in the UK. And that was not a very pleasant period for me personally. And it's still going on. I'm not naive enough to think it will stop in my lifetime. But when these events do happen, I have now more confidence to actually say, hang on, that's not right. How do we look at this? How do we approach this? How do we kind of resolve this? Unfortunately, with the organisation that I'm talking about, and again, they have no association with the Permaculture Association, that so far has been pretty fruitless, which is even more frustrating. In 2021, for somebody to question certain things in a very, very reasonable way, no shouting, no threatening or anything like that. And without going to details, it's not really a pleasant situation. I think, Jemma, you are aware of it. So just really to say that if these things do happen, and they will happen, they will happen. Jemma mentioned that there's a bit of cautiousness as to how to approach certain words and how to approach certain things. I think that's understandable. If things are done which could have been done better, I think the most important thing is to actually engage, talk about it, and not let it fester, which is what's happening right now.
It's really important. Sorry, I've got a slight bit of an echo on me, but these are really important points, and we actually plan to go through a few of the ideas for addressing things like that throughout this session, actually, and it would be really good to hear back from you on all the things that we discuss in this and more, because we're going to be carrying on with this work, and we've been doing it for sort of focusing on equity for about a year, but there's still so much to be done. You mentioned that this group was outside of the Permaculture Association, but within it everywhere there's work to be done. So I'm just really glad that you came today, and I hope that you give us feedback and join in for the whole of the session, and hopefully somewhat of what me and Wal have done today will hopefully try and address and prevent things like that from happening.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. I really appreciate that, man. And I can see Georgina's got her hand up, Jemma, as well. But I just wanted to say to Patrick again, you're so right. I think what we're almost drowning within is both the extensiveness and the subtlety within which these processes kind of get shut down and then get problematized around individuals on what might be an interpersonal level. And the same processes are at work structurally with what you might say are the kinds of things that have been illustrated by the recent government report, into we won't sidetrack and go into that, but you can see something of the kind of imposition and the either playing down or playing up of racism, depending on who's trying to say what. But we have a real issue and a difficulty, not just in this country, but because race is integral to issues of capitalism and subsequent things like class and lots of other historical things, we find it really, really difficult to pick up and run with these things and to sometimes surpass them. Georgina, sorry, you had your hand up.
Sorry, no, it wasn't a hand up. It was supposed to be this, but I only had one hand free at the time.
Oh, sorry, I don't know what it means. Good.
Sorry about that.
Karen.
Sorry, just responding on Emma's on the video that you've just played, and thinking about what she was saying about diversity and how that word is becoming embedded in, especially corporations. To address racism, and I'm actually originally from South Africa, and obviously there's it's had colonial past, etc., and they replaced diversity with affirmative action, but both of those words and both of those actions never really address the systemic racism within any organization or any place. So that was just the thought that came to my head when I was listening to that video. So it's really, we have to delve so much deeper than just putting out words.
Yeah.
I can't see the questions in the chat because I'm screen sharing, so I don't know if they're questions about the session or if it's things that you want to say now, but if someone else who can read them just wants to say if it's something to say now. Can you see those comments?
Yeah, so it's a comment from Candida. It's not a question, but it's just a more contribution.
Mm-hmm.
What does it say?
Wow. Yeah, thank you, Candida. Again, I suppose I'm left with, initially hoping that 15-year-old at least has some kind of nearby support whereby, she can talk through what's happened there and process that situation, partly in terms of, learning from it by way of resilience. I think one of the words that has become almost, a life theme for me in terms of trying to describe some of these things is this sense in which, as Patrick was saying, it's there all the time. There's an anticipatory sense in which you have to learn to be resilient. You need to learn to struggle against it, and you also need to save some energy for the optimism and for continuing against the struggle. And like I said, when things happen in broad daylight, out of the blue, you can quickly get into a situation that can tumble into something far more serious with you doing nothing. Yeah, I've got an example to just illustrate that, but I think I see Patrick had his hand up. Patrick, are you there?
We go to Patrick, and then I think we might need to carry on with our slides. Actually,
okay.
Yes, sorry about that. I think just a general query, really, or question to everybody in the group. I notice it's pretty evident to me when I have a look online on articles, videos, blogs, etc., relating to permaculture. There's not a lot of people like me there. In other words, I don't really see black people there, unless it is based in Africa, for example, or the West Indies. But America, Europe, Britain, I don't really see a lot of black people involved in permaculture. There's actually a black permaculture Facebook group, because people felt that they had to kind of separate and kind of join and create, an exclusively black permaculture group. Paul Wheaton, who's a few people may have heard of him, he's a permaculturist, was asked a question: why are there not many black people in permaculture? He had his own views. I've got my own views as well. I'm just wondering if that's something that's been noticed by anybody, and if anybody has a view as to why that is.
Patrick, I'm not involved in permaculture. What were those views? What were the reasons?
So one of the reasons was kind of financial. So in a lot of communities, the black community is kind of at the lower end of the rung, financially as well as socially, etc. People with less finances, more poverty, have other concerns.
Yeah, less time.
Just living, basically. That's one reason. So that's what he came up with. Also, gardening as well. A lot of people come to permaculture from gardening. And think so. This is in a forum, so it wasn't just his view. This is quite a few people in the forum who weighed in with their view as well. So gardening, there's a thought that not a lot of black people get involved with gardening as well. But I guess in the UK community, a lot of people are from African and West Indian backgrounds, and farming is very prevalent there. So I believe they are relevant reasons, as well as other reasons as well, which maybe they, I'm assuming they were white, it's only an assumption, they may not have been privy to or experienced.
Yeah, they are really good reasons to explain it. If you actually look at the slides that I'm just sharing now at the moment, you'll see that all the things on the left are some of the things that affect a lot of different people. They affect all people to different rates and different levels. And all the things on the right of this squiggly line are the things that permaculture teachers teach. It's actually anyone that uses the UK core curriculum. Each one of those is a section from the social systems part of the curriculum. But one thing I'm wondering whether it is being thought about by permaculture teachers, and it may be that they are teaching this and they are thinking about it, is that those things on the left, when they're teaching how to improve your life and design it to be better, that different people have got different access to those things and different resources, and people are oppressed in different ways. So it's not enough to say, get real wealth, and this is how you do it. Here's how to get personal resilience. Here's how to do work that reconnects. If you can't get a job, or if you can't get the same access to healthcare, if you're turned down at every single level, and if you're not represented when you turn up and you're judged for the way that you look, and I think one of the things that I really wanted to talk about today was and the question really is, are permaculture teachers making the relationship between social systems and power? And how do you see these things that are under social systems and contexts, and do you relate and talk to your learners about how it's not the same for everybody? And do you actually do that in your courses? I don't know if that helps at all, Patrick, in sort of framing that, but we are definitely thinking about the barriers to engagement and the barriers to our events and our membership and everything. We are trying to really look at all of the reasons for that. And I think a big part of it is the curriculum that we put out. If the curriculum itself and the courses that we're offering aren't speaking to all people and to where they're at, I think that there is just a barrier immediately to engaging with permaculture.
Yeah, I thanks for that. I totally agree with that. I think also there's a certain state of mind as well, where after years of not really progressing, maybe being knocked down, I think you've both mentioned adversity, resilience, after many years of facing that kind of struggle. You set your own barriers, and I'm talking about black, brown people, maybe because you kind of drink the Kool-Aid, as it were, or buy into the restrictions that are set upon you every time you open your door and walk into the world. It's a kind of so you kind of don't progress past your boundaries, because you've been knocked back so often, and because of that you don't explore more opportunities. And permaculture is an opportunity. That's how I see it. So you stay within, what's the term? You stay within your boundaries, basically. And again, that's because of experiences that have happened beforehand. Whereas if you do step over those boundaries, like I said, the events that I experienced during a Zoom session on a course in 2021 still bewilders me. It still does, even though I know it happens. And that's why I feel a lot of people don't actually venture outside that kind of safety zone. So that's one of the reasons I think, and there are others, but that's, I think, one of them. Yeah.
I think for me, just looking at, I suppose, again, interrelatedness of class, power, social systems and stuff, and Jemma's slide about, the whole way in which people experience community life. And again, I think from what Patrick has said, I remember being in Smith's, and I think I was trying to get like a permaculture magazine, and very much, it seems as if it's a hobby for white people type stuff. But at the point at which we might practically think about notions of, the title of our session, awareness, attitudes and actions, even the idea that when a course is on, what's within our capability in terms of how we might advertise that differently, so that we make it accessible, so that we go beyond our comfort zone or our usual network or our email kind of recipients, and actually do some physical stuff where we take and welcome people through posters and go to doctors' surgeries that are in places where people maybe don't have the same opportunities as we, just so that, again, on the ground, that there is an attempt to try and invite people into a space, acknowledging how, as I said, kind of class, power and race and finance and lots of other issues kind of can impact on these opportunities. Because I think, like Patrick was saying, from my elders who are now in their 80s and 90s, but had their formative years in the Caribbean, many of them have got allotments and, through that have gained knowledge and passed it on. But it's almost as like they're invisible, and it's and because they haven't necessarily commodified that knowledge, or they're not still coming from an academic premise or from a kind of particular, organizational stance. There's a lot of stuff there that we could learn from that we miss out on because we've not got no relationship. Yeah.
Thanks, Val. So the next slide is a bit wordy. I've learned a lot from the last few days of excellent presenters saying not to put so many words on the screen, but I had to put this many on just to show you the what's actually included in the UK PDC core curriculum. So that's the social systems context section, and you're encouraged as part of the core curriculum for anyone that uses it. I know some people here won't be using the UK curriculum, but for those that do use it, you're encouraged to pick 5 of those topics from social systems. And it feels to me like there's some things missing there. So one of the things I would like to do, and throughout the whole of the core curriculum actually, so one of the things that me and Weil were talking about when we met about how can we make changes was Weil went through our core curriculum and has come up with a series of suggestions, as this is where his experience is, and looked at our core curriculum and thought about ideas for how we can improve equity in permaculture from the very point of our curriculum, from the very first moment that people look up what's included in our courses and from what you teach. So we're going to put you into some breakout rooms, and if Lucy could share a document, there's going to be a document for you to use to feed back into. So within that document, you'll see, like it did say group 1, group 2. I think we've got enough people now for a few breakout rooms, maybe.
Jemma, Loopy was in the middle of a world-shattering piece of wisdom, so which we need to hear.
Okay, great.
The question was from Patrick, I think hasn't made it back into this room, was about whether permaculture is splitting as a movement, and I was saying that it's more like it's evolving and growing, and like it's different generations of the same plant, it's the same seeds that have been saved and grown on, so it looks a bit different and may have different names, but it's got the same roots.
So was there any sort of big bits that anyone wanted to feedback from their session? Like, what were there some really obvious places that we can make changes, or did you just find none, or how did you find that?
I think like we could go through the whole curriculum with emphasising what that means in terms of equity. We went, we were just right at the beginning, and there was loads already. So it's a working group, I think, to do that.
I'm really glad you think so. Do you want to be part of that group? I'm really hoping that we can pick this up and really sort of put together quite a lot of changes. Andy?
Well, just one of the things that I think, I agree we should do that. And one of the things that we didn't talk in the breakout group, which is, sort of strikes me, is that, and there's something about sort of training ourselves as a body of educators in the issues and having a greater awareness and sort of learning the language. There are words which, like the word privilege, a few years ago, I didn't know that it was being used in a particular way. So I didn't really hear people very well when they said that I was privileged. I was like, really? Now I totally get it, because I understand what the words means and how it's being used. And I think if we can train ourselves and upgrade our skills and our knowledge, then yes, we can change the curriculum, but if we upgrade our skills, then we'll change the curriculum for ourselves in every session, and we'll be thinking and bringing that awareness to it. So I think that there's something here about actually seeing this as a critical area of sort of skills and knowledge, and that doesn't sort of do it justice, but yeah, we need to know more about this, feel it more, and then I think we will and we'll want to be changing the course. That's what we're doing in Leeds, because I've been on a modest course to learn some of this stuff, and some work I'm doing in Leeds anyway, and so naturally I'm wanting to change our course.
Thanks for that, Andy. Well, you were going to talk to us about some of your ideas for places we could make changes. I'm just conscious about the time, and I'm wondering whether, if this is something we're going to pick up after this, where we're going to have a working group and make all of these changes, whether we need to go in depth into those now, or whether you just want to briefly run through some of the ones that we came up with.
Yeah, again, I'm learned a lot just by listening to the specific, say, permaculture kind of context. And I suppose all it does immediately, I think, is to remind me of, say, the last 12 years I had in one of the universities in Birmingham. And I think, this work is hard, but it is about kind of going with it, and on the different levels of language, recognizing when maybe not to have alliances, recognizing the value that I think Patrick said it earlier on about the separate space that some people may require, so that they can kind of get their thoughts and their sense of involvement crystallized before they move into sharing with others. And so it's a kind of differential approach that's required, but it needs to be one where we need to have courageous conversations, both with those who are like us and those who are not like us. And we need to kind of keep those bridges open and recognize that in the process, I think we are, if we're going to be feeling it more, we're going to make ourselves vulnerable at times.
Brilliant. Thanks. Is that screen share working there for you?
Yeah.
Yep. You can see my presentation again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. It is working. Thank you. Cool. Well, I really am looking forward to reading the document and seeing everyone's breakout room notes. Sorry that you didn't have access to the document. I've just changed it and reshared it in the chat, but really looking forward to collecting more of that information from what you think needs to change. But I just wanted to show you this slide, which is what I think the potential is in making changes like this. So like the educators themselves will be prompted to learn more. So like if we had an interesting conversation in our group about how some of this stuff should be obvious, really, but I don't know if it is obvious to everyone. I know that Patrick's recent experience shows that it isn't, and that there are teachers out there that aren't thinking about equity within permaculture. I'm sure that that's not the case with everyone, but it certainly does exist. And so the educators themselves are prompted to learn more by having these prompts within the core curriculum. Like our core curriculum is used internationally, so there's an awful lot of educators that sign up to our certified teachers register and use our core curriculum. So this impact is not even just within the UK, it's much wider. So educators are learning more, and then the outcomes of that, like more people are reached by, like you reach more people with permaculture, more people feel like they can come on the courses, they feel like they're represented, so more people are going away learning about permaculture. That's awesome. We can better address systemic failures, like the learners themselves. Even if your participants on your course are from a particular area or from a particular background, they'll go on and design all over the world. So like all sorts of designs challenging the way that systems are can happen at a great impact. So potentially the world becomes significantly fairer, significantly faster, which would be really nice just from a few changes to the core curriculum. And I realise that it's a much more complex problem than that, but just this one, like changing the way that we do our education and the way we think about things could really have quite a big impact. And that last slide is for you, Well.
Okay. I think I just wanted to pick up on what you said, Jemma, in the previous slide as well, in terms of I think what our imaginative alternatives. Sorry, the host is. Can you hear me, guys?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. No, and just this sense of trying to recognise the accessibility of things in and around nature, and how clearly its ability to kind of strike at the core of our well-being in terms of who we are. And I remember this example, speaking with Jemma about it in terms of the opportunities that even seeing things like permaculture, allotmenting, being out in parks, given the privatization of space and stuff like that, these things are becoming quite crucial. And instead of, say, people being excluded from areas, you know, it'd be really, really great if we could see our bits of our curricula or bits of some of the processes that we engage in inviting other people can open up, you know, new relationships to nature and to the environment generally, because I think that there is a sense in which, you know, our processes within the wider society, as we've touched on, are exclusionary, and people are often feeling vulnerable because they're made to feel that it's not for them. And you know, I was talking to Jemma about, you know, I love cycling, I love hill walking. My professional confidence in doing lots of youth work and youth exchanges comes out of the resilience I apply. But I know when I go walking and, you know, I'm with a predominantly black group, it's a profoundly different feeling from when I'm with a white group. So you get this in terms of how people see you and how they profile you. And so what I'm trying to say in bringing this session and bringing this last slide together is that we really do need to be aware of some of the ways in which our participants might have experienced the world and where they're coming from, and to be open to just showing our own vulnerabilities in trying to kind of, you know, make our courses and some of the things that flow out of our courses more inclusive. So as the title suggests, you know, awareness is really about us learning and continuing on that learning process. And I was particularly kind of, you know, conscious of the document I think Jemma sent me about, I think it's on one of the links that we've got about, you know, the whole background of permaculture coming from sources that are centuries old. You know, we need to be able to kind of take that on board and share that and together then critique that, you know, what does permaculture mean within this context? Because a lot of people will get more from that than just starting with permaculture as if it's, you know, where everything began, you know. So it's putting things into context on that historical level, which I think is quite important. Yeah. If we don't become aware that there isn't, it lessens our ability, I think, to kind of subsequently engage and possibly change for the better, you know, our own and others' attitudes. And clearly, if we can take action within this kinds of context and being sensitive to some of the things that we want to change, you know, learning is going to be at the center of it. So I think it's important that the discussion continues and we continually review what we're doing.
I just add to that slightly as well, Val, that like for me, the learning part of it is as much to do with just learning about yourself as it is to do with learning about the context of permaculture. So we've been doing sort of whiteness training with work and really starting to look at sort of what is my place within racism? What am I experiencing? What am I feeling in certain situations, and trying to unpack all of this stuff that gets put on you from when you're a child all the way up to now, constantly in the media. And by unpacking it and starting to analyze it, you learn so much about your experience with the world and with racism. And I think to learn, really, it's like a responsibility we've all got to go away and really learn like what's happened here. Like, how did we get to this point, and how does this exist within me? So I just wanted to make that clear as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are there any other comments? Yeah, Georgina?
I was just concurring, really. That I think that's really powerful, and yeah, I mean, as someone who couldn't sleep last night for thinking about police violence in the US and everything. Yeah, I think I guess sometimes you forget how, even if you are in a position of white privilege, you are affected by racism, because you were party to the same kind of media messages or whatever it is that's around you that shapes your experience. So I think that's really interesting. And I did have another thought as well, though, kind of picking up on what you were saying, well, and also the earlier discussion about why is permaculture perhaps less accessible sometimes to Black and brown communities. And I'm wary about generalizing, but I feel that often there's more racial diversity in more urban centres, and so then there's also that like urban rural divide, and as you say, there might be that people might come from heritage that where their grandparents were close to the land, but a generation or two on, they're quite divorced from that, and so how to create that integration. And thinking about maybe sometimes it's not just going to be about putting our adverts or whatever in those maybe urban spaces, encouraging people to come out to a permaculture centre and do a course, but also about coming to them and thinking about maybe how we can, there's obviously already an urban permaculture movement, but thinking more and more about like how we can bring permaculture into urban spaces, into schools, maybe how to make it bite-sized, how to make it something that, every kid can do in a space this big. Thinking about project gardens in South London particularly, and ideas like that, and how to make those overlaps with other things that can be in. So like with May Project Gardens, hip hop music being into permaculture. So
yeah. I think the crossover there, Georgina's are kind of endless, and I think that's something of like the creativity and the action that you can't necessarily predetermine, but it comes out of people wanting to establish relationships and going forward together. And I think, as Jemma said, being present holistically and fully in a place, it's important.
Thank you for that. Luby's got her hand up as well.
Yeah, I was just seeing from what you were saying there, Jemma, about, that we really need to pay attention to how we have been culturally conditioned. And that's in so many different ways, around race, around what we see as healthy food, all of the techniques that we're trying to bring in, and the vision we have for permaculture relies on us shifting our culture and shifting the conditioning we have around it. So maybe there's something that needs to be in the curriculum around, awareness of culture and identifying and unpicking our cultural conditioning around race, around gender, around class, around food growing, around money, so around all these different issues.
That's really useful. Thank you. Andy?
Well, just to say, I think we've talked about training ourselves in raising this awareness, learning. Another aspect I think is really important, as well as getting people onto, permaculture design courses. There's good work getting people into projects, but I think one of the things that we haven't really done yet is really find a way to bring people onto teacher training courses. And I think if we could start to do that and actually have a really good body of teachers from many different groups, ultimately that's where I think we get a lot of big change. So I'm really, really thinking that now that's something we've got to focus on. So let's do that.
And making sure that the curriculum for the teachers on the courses includes this aspect as well.
Yeah, well, completely. All of it. Yeah, sure.
So we have 2 minutes left, and Wal really would like to share this last video with you. Wal, would you like to say a few words before I turn it on?
Yeah, it's so much to say, and it's really been good. In fact, I almost feel like I've been listening in to you guys in terms of this passionate interest you've got, and it's been wonderful in terms of just increasing my understanding of some of the challenges that you face. But I think I would just pick up on I think what I heard you say, Georgina, about that sense of kind of going to bed with it all, and this sense in which it, all of what we're doing cannot exist outside of what is the social milieu in terms of what's happening across the country, and not just in this country, clearly within America as well. And once we start to hone in on this bigger context, it's about how we're able to join the dots with whatever we're doing, with what's happening beyond us as well. And it's really, really important that we don't go on as if we're so preoccupied with our own passion that we can't relate it to other things. Because I've got friends in Bristol who have been arrested following some of the things that have happened there just by way of being on the street. And, there are some things happening in this country that are jaw-dropping under the guise of COVID in terms of people's liberties and stuff like that. So there is an urgency to what we're doing. And I was just saying to Jemma that I kind of just went to bed last night very much thinking about Doreen and Stephen Lawrence's father, and just like, I know they have a Stephen Lawrence Day, but just what it must be like to live with that kind of legacy, with that kind of sense in which, it's 2021 and we appear to be going backwards on this issue in terms of how people's lived experiences and subsequent profiling can lead to them being unfavorably treated and stuff. So whilst there are lots of things, and there tends to be headlines around deaths and when negative things occur in police stations, there are a lot of things happening in the everyday that are on a parallel with this in terms of how people's civil liberties are being kind of diminished, and how they're not being affirmed through just trying to live in a place where they're born in terms of belonging. So all this I wanted to say, really. But thank you again for being open in this discussion and sharing your ideas. And yeah, I really do hope that you can keep the dialogue kind of going and keep it authentic, and to listen to each other and support each other as well. And hope to see you in the future in the flesh as well. Because I check for this kind of Zoom business. It's good, but it's not as good as feeling people, you know what I mean? Anyway, thanks, Jemma.
We are a couple of minutes over, but it's only a short video, so I'll just press play.
Good luck, everybody.
Thank you.
This moment of global unrest, where people of all ethnicities are voicing their protests alongside black people to say we will no longer ignore the racism we all deplore. And that's why we will honour Stephen with humility and embrace all the differences and diversity of our human race, in celebration of all Britain can be,
in our families, our lives
and our communities. We will make the changes that we need to see.
Raising our voices in all we do.
We will educate everyone that he is part of all of us too. And we will never forget Stephen Lawrence.
Stephen Lawrence Day is the 22nd of April 2021. Register at stephenlawrenceday.org and help us create a legacy of change.
Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks for coming today. We will be in touch about further work on this topic, and the handouts that you've got, I've got loads more resources for further learning, so you can do all of that learning that we mentioned. There's tons on there, podcasts and articles and things, so please do check that out. Thank you all so much for planning this session with me, for coming and supporting me through all of this work. And one of the things that, just very briefly, that we didn't mention is I've made mistakes throughout this process, and me and Val have had such a lovely open relationship that we've been able to deal with that together and sort of have that trust to make this and carry on with this work. So thank you, Val, for everything you've done.
No worries.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Good to meet you. Good to meet you guys. And yeah, keep up the stuff, Ben. Definitely.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's time for a Wonder Me session now, if you can be bothered to stay on screens for any longer. So
maybe.
So yeah, see you soon and see you tomorrow.
See you soon. Bye all.
Okay. Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, Val. That's brilliant. I look forward to meeting you in person.
Yeah, be good. Nice one, Andy. Take care.
Bye.
Georgina, whereabouts are you based, Georgina? Are you in London?
No, I'm on the south coast, like near Portsmouth.
Hey, so my missus is from Portsmouth. Oh, had some lovely days running away from some NF types up there. You know, but it's a lovely part of the world, though, man. Definitely, yeah.
Nice to be by the sea. Very lucky in that sense.
Yeah, make the most of the weather and that as well. You know what I mean? That's good.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you so much.
No, good to meet you, and thanks for your contributions as well. Because as I said, it's really useful to kind of hear your experiences and sharing the kind of delight of having this opportunity to teach others. It's really, really important, you know. And the more we can demystify it, you know, it's all around us. Pick up a pot plant, it starts there type stuff, you know.